Welcome everyone to today's webinar, introducing the Oracle SQL Developer Extension for VS Code. My name is Nikki Chen. I'm a Marketing Event Manager for the Developer Initiative here at Oracle. Today, we're excited to show you how easy it is to work with Oracle database from VS Code. A quick note, we'll be sending the session recording to the same email address used for today's event. If you have any questions during the webinar, please drop them in the Zoom chat or in the Q&A area, and we'll be ready to answer them. We've also set up a Slack channel, Oracle DB SQL, in our developer workspace that you can access at the QR code or at the link on the screen. This channel will remain open after the event for you to contact us directly whenever you have any questions. Today's webinar will be presented by Chris Bryce, SVP of Software Development, and Jeff Smith, a distinguished product manager. Without further ado, I'll pass it to the presenters.
Everyone, thanks for joining us. It's nice to see some familiar names and a lot of new ones in the chat. So our agenda today is quite simple. We're going to be talking about the latest addition to our SQL Developer family, what that means for the product line in general. I'm going to give you a lot of demo, show you what's out there right now, talk about what we're building for the subsequent releases this year, a week or so. So let's get started. We had our names shared, but you might not know who we are. I'm a product manager on the database team. And we call our little group the Database Tools Group. SQL Developer is by far the most well-known of those, but we also have a data modeling solution. We have a command line interface for the database. We have REST APIs. We build tooling for our cloud services, and we do a lot more stuff. Our group is led by Chris Rice, who was one of the first developers on the SQL Developer product back in the day. So you're in for a treat to have Chris on with us today. Yeah, he's going to help us man questions too.
Yeah, I'll be manning the Q&A. I think Jeff's going to do the bulk of the load here. But like Jeff said, it's always great to get feedback directly from folks like you. And we're here for many, many tools, including cloud tools these days, consoles, database development, command line, CI/CDs, you name it. It touches a database. We're pretty much involved.
Chris keeps me busy, that's for sure. So this is kind of like our debut public marketing event for this product, for this offering. However, it's been out since January, and we've had a couple of updates since. So I'm going to catch you up on what we've done, what's available right now. So VS Code is probably the most popular IDE out there for a catch-all across all development programming languages, or even just text editors. And we've built an extension for that, and they have something called the Marketplace, and I'll show you how you can go in there and download it. But we're rebuilding SQL Developer from a standalone Java application to an extension into VS Code's really rich marketplace. So you can go in there and say, hey, I'm working with Python today, or I'm working with PHP today, or hey, I need a formatter for JSON or a parser, or I need support for YAML files today. You can literally just search for what you want and pull it down into a single unified editing experience. They've got really great extensions for dealing with Git, for generating documentation. If you're using Markdown, it's got something in there for everyone. So it really makes sense for us to go where the people are. Like, I don't want to say, hey, you have to use this if you want to work with Oracle. We want to provide the tools for the environments you're already dealing with. That's why we give you the web interface, we give you the command line interface, we build the REST APIs. It's like, okay, well, we have all these people in VS Code. We should go have a really good Oracle experience there as well. So when you download our extension, these are the base features that we provide. So obviously you can define connections to your database. And the look and feel is going to be very common to the old SQL Developer, which I'll show in a second. But once you're connected, then you can do all the fun stuff like open SQL scripts and run those through our script engine, or take a single statement and run that and get like the Excel kind of grid output back, where you can then export that out to various formats. You can drill into the contents of the database, open objects, make edits to those, browse the contents of a table without writing any SQL, get the DDL script behind those objects. You can work with PL SQL, you can do compile, see where your errors, fix that, save those, execute those, get the ref cursors back. What else do we have? We've implemented a language server protocol, which is something that VS Code uses for all of the different extension providers to plug into. That's what makes things like the snippets work, the IntelliSense or the type ahead stuff, the click drill into or peek features that the IDE there has. So we've built one for Oracle SQL and PL SQL objects, and I'll demo that quite a bit. We have, of course, our SQL formatter. So I think I've talked these bullet points enough. There's a lot in here, even for basically our version 1 release. And of course, there's a lot more to come because SQL Developer does quite a bit. One of the fun things, especially as a PM to see, is like when you put your baby out there and you're worried about things going bad. We actually were trending the #1 extension in the marketplace. So that was really cool. And that's thanks to the support that you folks have been giving us for all these years. So thanks for that. So if we rewind the clock a few years, some of you might remember when we launched Project Raptor. That graduated into the full product of V1 of SQL Developer in 2006. And again, it had this panel where you could create connections, you could browse things, you could open a worksheet, you could do stuff, you had your grids. And this is kind of almost what it looks like today. That platform is showing its age a bit, and it's really time for us to move it into a modern framework so we continue to best serve our customers. Now, this version, the old SQL Developer, I call it Classic. We're not calling it Classic, but what you know as Oracle SQL Developer today will be around for a few more years as we move those features into the VS Code universe. So if you're worried that I'm taking this away from you, you don't have anything to worry about. Yeah, it's going to be here for a while. In the past few years, I mean, we've grown this into a very, I think, popular, at least ubiquitous offering. So most Oracle shops are going to have it. It's been one of the top downloads on oracle.com since it was released. And the thing I'm most fond of thinking about is just all the money we're saving our clients, so they don't have to go buy expensive third-party tools. They can just use the stuff we give you, and you can be productive and hopefully happy on day one. Of course, if you're not happy or if you're less than happy, again, that's your cue to come reach out to us, either through formal mechanisms. You can go through your account teams, you can go through my Oracle support, but we also run the forums, and Chris and I are all over the place on social media, so we don't hide too much. We want the learning curve to be really as light, as shallow as possible. So I understand if you've never used VS Code before, there is going to be some learning on the VS Code side. But if you look at what SQL Developer was doing way back in the day, and you look at how it's presented now, there's a lot of things in common. You know, we still kind of have the left-hand panel. But by the way, these are the desktop views that come out the box. You can move stuff around, but you're gonna have your connections, you're gonna be browsing things, you're gonna have your editors on the right, you're gonna be running stuff, you're gonna get the information back that you ask for. The #1 request I've had for SQL Developer, at least for the last 8-10 years, is true support for dark mode. So if you've been whining about dark mode, here is our first real opportunity to give you really what you're asking for. So why do we pick VS Code? I think I alluded to this a couple of times. Mostly it's just by far the #1 platform for developers today. I think even like 30% of Java developers are using VS Code today, but data professionals, students learning Python, people taking the, learn SQL or learn code in 100 days, those courses are being taught with tutorials built with VS Code. It has a really nice integrated terminal environment, which comes in handy for us because we have a really nice terminal solution, a command line interface for Oracle. Also, it's really active. It gets lots of updates. It's very well supported across lots of different platforms. So it just had all of the boxes checked, and we're picking a new home for the next, well, I don't know, bunch of years. And we decided this was the place that we were going to go. And maybe the last deal sealer was it also gives us the ability to provide the same environment experience in your browser too. So that's a big thing for us. We have a bunch of cloud services. People need SQL prompts in their browsers, and there's just a lot of nice feature there. So folks are already telling us they like it. Of course, people are also sharing with us the things they don't like, but I'm going to brag a little bit. So you have a public place here in the VS Code Marketplace where you can share your reviews. This is where you can tell us what you like and you don't like. A few people are having very nice things to say. If you're on the call and you see your words here, thank you again. Some of our ACE directors are having a lot of fun with it already. I will say people are being quite generous. They see this as a version 1. They see that not all of their favorite features are here. We're trying to give you a good experience even from day 1, and you can do the basic things. And we're going to try to do at least monthly updates. So we had an update in January, February, and March. We're working really hard to get an update out before the end of this month. And we're just going to have our hands full moving all of the features that you like in the old SQL Dev into the new one over the next 18 months or 2 years.
Hey, let me interrupt for a second, Jeff.
Please
There's
do.
a lot of questions repetitive, so I wanted to voice it real quick for everybody. So a lot of questions are coming through of, does it support X yet, right? So it may or may not support it directly graphically. However, the SQL worksheet is there, which of course you can type in any SQL, any PL SQL, whether it be scheduler or the AutoML or whatever you want. As well as, and Jeff will show this later, you can simply right click on connections and spawn a SQL CL right in context, which again, then you have the power of everything. Graphically, we don't have everything there yet, of course, because we got to start somewhere, and SQL Dev has been around for a long, long time. There's a lot to lift. So some of the graphical bits might not be there, but technically anything is possible because the whole worksheet is there, SQL CL is there, all of those things.
Thanks for the chance to catch my breath. That was appreciated. We'd be crazy to write everything from scratch. But we're also crazy a long time ago to kind of think ahead, like, hey, how can we build things here at Oracle in a common fashion where things can be reused? Novel concept, reusing code. So a lot of our core stuff in our tools are being able to be leveraged directly in this extension. So we were able to launch V1 with a lot of features out of the box. A lot of the right-click operations on the trees were defined in the original SQL developer. The backend that's being used to power all of the database requests, that's being reused too. So we're able to take a running head start and give you a lot of stuff out of the box. And it's also important to realize this because if you're seeing like a SQL developer quirk or just something that you're used to it doing and you see it working the same way in the VS Code extension, it's probably because it's in large part some of the same code. The new stuff is all of the new user presentation, all of the client GUI facing stuff, almost all of that is net new. It's basically web content versus like a GUI product provided by our old Java Swing tech. All right, so enough of the blah, blah, blahs. How do we get into it? So if you don't have VS Code installed already, you need to get that. If you do have VS Code installed already, you can, from a command prompt, I think, just type code install SQL Dev. Maybe Chris can put that string in the chat so everyone could see it. But in the GUI, the little set of boxes in the toolbar here, if you click on that, this is a list of all of your extensions. And it'll even show some of the popular ones that you can download. But if you just do a search for SQL Developer, look for our logo, click the install button, in about 3 minutes, it should be installed and it should be active and ready to be used. And then once that happens, you'll click this icon, and that's when you'll see our familiar connection dialog or navigator. If you're new to VS Code, one of the things that we love about it is the ability to deploy updates seamlessly to our users. So there will be no more of going to oracle.com/SQL developer, signing into an oracle.com account that you've created, clicking the download button and checking that you agree with our end user license agreement. It all becomes seamless here, even to the point of you should see a notification that says, hey, there's a new SQL Dev ready for you. Click here to enable it. And you might see the screen just kind of refresh and blank in and blank out. And when it comes back, you're running the latest and greatest. Now you can choose not to grab those, and you can even revert back to previous versions if you want. But in the marketplace on this page, you can see our change logs. So you can see what features have been added when. And this is also where you'll find links to their forums and where you can add a review. Before you connect, you might want to go into the preferences. So there's preferences for VS Code, and there are preferences for each of the extensions. So you'll find our extension along with the others. And you might want to just take a real quick look at this. So you can tell us where your TNS names file, if you have one already. Now we'll look in certain places, but if we don't find it, you won't be able to reference your TNS names entries. This allows you to point to the directory that you want us to use. The other thing you can do here is specify your login script. So anytime we make a connection, we're going to run that script to set up your environment. Once you've done those two things, then you're ready to create a connection and start going. So you can click this plus button. This will bring up the dialog. So it's very similar to the old SQL Dev. You name your connection. And again, use good names because those names will remind you where you're at any given time when you're doing stuff. We support basic and proxy connections for authentication. For the types of connections, there's like the easy connect, basic connect syntax. You have the TNS. If you're using our autonomous service in the Oracle Cloud and they give you the little zip file to download, we support those. You just simply click on the zip file and it shows you the services you can connect to and you're good to go. And the other thing we support, and this one's really important, custom JDBC URL. So we're not supporting via the GUI all of the 99 different ways to make database connections yet. So if you're using like an LDAP or a Radius or a Kerberos type connection, you want to connect and you're not seeing those listed here, you'll want to use the custom JDBC one. And then from there, you can put in the string that makes that possible. So you might have to do a little bit of math to generate those, but they're well documented. If you go onto our forums, you can see people sharing how they've done it. And then hopefully later this year, the GUI will just naturally support all of those, so you won't have to do any tricks. You've been using our tools for a long time. Thank you. You probably have lots of connections. When you start this up, we're not going to import them over out of the box. That'll come later this year. But in the meantime, you can export your connections manually using the old GUI. So you just right click and say, hey, export, choose the ones that you want to keep. And you can also say, hey, I want to encrypt the passwords and bring those over so I don't have to retype them in. And then in our command line interface in SQL CL, which by the way is included in every copy of both the VS Code extension and the old SQL Dev, just start up a session and you just run this command, con manager import, and you basically point to this file that you've generated over here. Our command line tech and our VS Code extension share the same connections. So once you define a connection in one, you can reference that connection by name in the other. So in SQL Plus, where you always have to do, SQL Plus or connect username / password at TNS string or use the easy connect syntax. In our tech, you can say simply SQL -name, the name of the connection, and we pull out all the information you need, including the username and password for that. So once you've done that and you open up your UI, you're going to see all of your connections here. That takes like 3 minutes. Again, hopefully later this summer, when you start this up, we'll prompt you with, oh, hey, we see you have some connections over here in the old SQL Dev. Do you want us to bring them over? So we'll make that even easier. All right, so I've done enough slides. Let's do some demo. This is where it gets to go be fun because I'm doing this for real. Do we need to pause another second for Q&A? I see like 20 bubbles up.
Oh my goodness, so many questions. So one question I have no idea about because I haven't used a Windows machine in about 20 years, but I believe the answer is no. Someone asked if they need local admin rights.
No.
I'm gonna guess no, but again, I'm not a Windows guy.
If you're a domain user, if you have like a corporate overlord determining what can and can't happen on your machine, if they have limited, if they don't let applications spin up Java, our extension might not work. So they'll need to give your local user the ability to use Java. Other than that, it should just come right up. Again, that's a good time to come to the forums because other Windows users like me can like give you advice or tell you exactly what to go tell your Windows desktop admin that they need to grant you so you can use this. So command palette is a VS Code feature that you're going to want to use or get familiar with when you're using our extension. Like I said, part of using our extension is also learning VS Code a bit, and I'll try to give you a couple tips and tricks here if you've never done VS Code before, but I can just simply type the word color, and you can see it's like, oh, there's color schemes that I can switch from, and I can browse those. And literally VS Code goes, well, here's the ones that are installed, or we can go grab new ones. So some of these are kind of obnoxious, like Dracula. I like Dracula because it's just off. But we'll stick with the default one. So there's your dark mode. I have on the left my connection tree. Again, if yours is blank, 'cause you've never created one before, you're going to click this plus button and it will bring up that dialog that we showed before. And you're going to name the connection, optionally save your password. And then once it's done, to get started, you can either expand an item here in the tree. This will make a connection if you don't already have one. And then you can right click on a connection and say, open a SQL worksheet. So that's going to do two things. That's going to give you the SQL worksheet here, but it's also going to associate the worksheet to a connection. So if I have any .SQL file open, I can go do things in the database, but only if I have a connection available. So it needs to know what database do you want to run this on. So you can either open a worksheet from here or on a given SQL worksheet file. Down here in the lower corner, right here where the little plug is, click that and it'll bring up a list of connections. So I could switch my connections here if I wanted to. Other nice feature in VS Code, I can just do Control or Command mouse scroll and it zooms the text in and out. Super nice. Control Enter, same keyboard shortcut as we have in the old SQL Dev. So we tried to keep the keyboard shortcuts the same. Like for example, Control up and down is still SQL history too. So we're trying to keep that learning curve as shallow as possible. The toolbar buttons are up here because that's where VS Code gives us the toolbar buttons. And if you mouse over them, you can see what the keyboard shortcut is. I can also open up that command palette again and simply type keyboard. And I can say, hey, show me all of the keyboard shortcuts. And then in here, I can type SQL Developer, and it'll show me all of the keyboard shortcuts. And again, these are assignable. I can change them. So if I don't like one of these, I can change it. Super nice. And that's across all of VS Code and all the extensions, not just ours. This is a text editor. This is an IDE. It's very file-based. So basically across the top, these are all the files that I have open, and I could have Python files and CSS and JavaScript files and .NET files and whatever, but our extension is looking for the file extensions that we had associated with the old SQL Dev, like so specifically .SQL files, the .pls, PKB, PKS, PRC, I think, and there's a KLR extension that no one seems to know why it's named that, but I'm pretty sure that's Chris's initials.
It might be.
It might be. So we also have the ability to run your scripts. This is a generic one, just like a single SQL statement. And you can see I'm getting the pages like every 10 records. I don't like that. So I can simply say set page size 100 and run this again. And I should get everything in a single page now, right? And all of the old tips and tricks from our old SQL Dev are kind of here. So, I want this back as a CSV file. Make sure this came back as a CSV. Oh.
Yeah, the nice thing Jeff's showing here, right, is again, back to SQL Dev is a beast. It's been around forever. Obviously, it's a huge code base. So a lot of the work and why it took us a little longer to get this thing going is how to leverage that existing code base in a new world. So architecturally, what's happening is underneath this, there is that old, not old, but that Java code base running. And that exact same Java code base is SQL CL. It is the old SQL Dev. It is SQL Dev Web. So it's the same shared code base across everything, which will give you a nice bug for bug compatibility. Chances
It's
are, if it
established.
works in SQL Dev Web or SQL CL, it will work here and vice versa.
It's mature. Yeah. Now, if
Yes,
you come down to
mature
the
code base.
output,
That's the way to say it.
I'm the word guy. I'm the fancy word guy. If you come down here to the output panel and you switch it to SQL Dev, you can see that back network channel communication. This is a good place to come if something's not working the way you think it should. If you go onto the forums and you see someone like me go, hey, why isn't it working? Like, well, hey, can you check the log? This is what I need here.
So hey, Jeff, real quick, can you change that
Yep.
CSV to HTML?
I see what you're going to have.
Someone asked if it was possible, so.
You betcha. Yeah. And if you spool this to a file and then you open the HTML file, there's a good chance you're going to have an HTML extension already open in VS Code. And when it opens, you're going to have a really nice HTML editor here too, right? So
in that right there is why we picked here for a platform, because all of these things just work, right? Like VS Code is naturally set up for HTML, for JavaScript, for all of these things. In database 23, if everyone's been paying attention, JavaScript is going to be inside the database. So marrying these worlds is a natural place for us to go for the future of where database is headed.
this is one of my favorite things, is the real natural integration with the command line. As powerful as the editor is and as nice as the GUI we have, sometimes you just want the Spartan, I type and it happens, and that's all it does feel. And so on any connection, I can right click and say, hey, open for me a terminal with SQL CL, or in a worksheet, I can click this run in SQL CL, and we will automatically connect to the same database. We'll automatically take whatever you have up here and issue it down here. Now, once it's down here, it's disconnected from what's above. So I can say tables, and it'll bring back a list of tables. You know, I can run select hello from Duel, and it'll do that. Now, when I'm done down here, over here on the right, here's a list of things that are open, and I can simply kill it. If I do that, it goes away. So it's a separate connection. So transaction-wise, if you're doing things up top and you're not seeing stuff on the bottom, it's because you need to commit, because we're literally using separate sessions. How are we doing on time? I got like at least 10 minutes more I can play. I think we're doing good. Here's a big thing. You're looking at some code. You want to go do something with these objects and you're not sure what they are. So let me, let's just do this. I can right click on employees and I can say go to declaration. This one's a little trickier because I have lots and lots of objects in my dictionary called employees. And it's telling me, hey, we found all of these things. Which one do you want to go look at? And I actually want to go look at this object. If we only find one hit, it'll just auto open to that object. But once I double click, we've opened basically what we have as the right side of the tree. You know, click on something and it opens. This is just an alternative way to get into the dictionary browser. So instead, I could have come over here, expanded tables, and double clicked on employees, and it would have opened on the right. I'm cheating a little bit. I'm running a preview version of our next version of the tool. So we're adding support for filters. I'll be able to filter lists of objects and also lists of schemas. That's by far the #1 request we've had for, hey, when can we have this feature? Because if you're in a very large dictionary, like you're connected to like an e-business suite, your apps database, you got thousands of users and, you know, hundreds and thousands of types of objects. So the filter support is coming. It's coming very soon. And I think you're going to like it because it's basically implemented the same way it is in the old SQL Dev. So if you have local synonyms in your schema that point to tables and other objects. You can use those to load the objects, and you can add any sort of combination of, hey, if it looks like this and doesn't look like this, load the object for me. We can live browse the contents of the object. So I can add new records. I can update a record. This assumes that I have the privilege to do this work, right? So I can't just add records if I don't have an insert or update privilege on the table. I can right click on any of these grids, and I would say this is probably the most frequently used feature we've ever built, exporting stuff out. If you're wondering when the native support for Excel exports is coming, I really hope later this year. For now, you can live with CSV, I hope. What else do we have in here? Sorting, dragging and dropping columns around, hiding columns, all of this stuff is in here. So if I want to see last name first without redesigning the table structure, I can do that. If I don't want to see the salary, because that just depresses me when I see my salary or someone else's, I can add that to the hidden column. And this grid refreshes. I can right click and do multi-column sorts. So if I want to see first name, nulls last, descending, I can hit save. But I can also just double click on one of these column headers. So if I want to sort this by employee ID, I can double click and it'll apply a sort. Double click again, it reverses the sort. But if I want the multiple column sorts, that's when I need to do the right click to apply the sorts. And then I can also come in here on these Y tables, right click and do a single record view. So it's
Oh,
kind of
got
like
another great question. How's this? Give you another breather.
yes.
Are there any SQL Dev Classic features you do not plan to migrate to VS Code? I'll say yes, of course. For example, however, it's going to be stuff that's not used a lot. For example, there's OLAP features in SQL Dev Desktop. Don't know if anyone here, we got 200 plus people on the horn here. If anyone uses that OLAP stuff, let me know. Maybe we'll reevaluate. And there's going to be things in there because we do have, the phone home, tell us what you're using, and enough people do that, so we get a good feel of what's being used in various products or various features across the product. So we'll be fact-based in any decisions on things we don't bring across, if that makes sense and if that's a squishy enough answer.
I really hope the trade-off is worth it, though. So what you lose, you're also gaining on the other side. So for example, navigating your dictionary via these trees sometimes isn't very fun. I'm up here on the employees table. These are sort of like breadcrumb navigators. So instead of looking at employees table, I can say, oh, I want to go look at this emp table instead. Or I can even switch schemas. Like, hey, take me into the HR REST schema that I have and let me go look at the regions table. And like, of course, dark mode, we're giving you dark mode. So if you got dark mode, you can't complain about us losing other stuff. Stored procedures. Of course, we support that kind of stuff. So right now you can do the development directly out of the database, and in the update that we're working on later this month, you'll be able to do file-based development too. So you'll be able to open a PL SQL file, make changes, save it, just like you would here directly out of the dictionary. So here's my code. The only kind of interesting thing here is, so the bottom portion is shared with other things that VS Code has, like the log panel and stuff. But down here, when I open the data dictionary objects, there's this details panel that opens. So I can see what dependencies my stored procedure has. That's down here along with, say, SQL history. If I want to run this, I can just click the run button and it'll generate the anonymous block script that will go just like the old SQL Dev. If you guys are seeing like a UI rendering delay, I'm blaming Zoom because when I'm not using Zoom to share my desktop, this is wicked fast. But I can also, we've also carried over this thing. Like when we do work for you, we always want to show you the code that we're running on your behalf. So you can A, learn how we're doing things, and B, steal our stuff, or C, change what we're doing so it's going to do what you want to do. So that doesn't go away. So if I run this, it'll kick off that PL SQL code, and we'll grab the standard out, any DB must output, standard error down here to the script output panel, or at least it's supposed to. Snippets. Oh, let me show some of the code helper stuff. So I'm going to close this and come back here. Snippets. If I need help with a I don't know, an analytic function or the decode statement or the case statement, I can pull these up. They're not editable via the GUI at the moment. We're thinking about building a user interface, but you can edit these snippets via their raw SQL files. And your custom snippets you've added in the old SQL dev, eventually you'll be able to bring those over too. Let me connect up to a cloud database. So instead of using my local 23C instance, I'll go up to my always free autonomous 19C instance. And I can come down here and switch. Yeah, it's down here in red. It's saying, hey, no connection attached. It's got my connection listed first. I can select that. I could right click on this. And actually, let's not right click. Let's drag and drop. So I want a select statement. So it's going to generate this for me, but I don't want all the columns. I want to see my activity name, type, description, elapsed time, distance, drag and drop, select, and it's just doing that for me. So that's one way to get code generation. The LSP support, you know, we have the keyword, we have the language syntax built in. So it's detecting like, hey, you probably want to type from next. So I can just hit tab and it auto completes. But I want to bring in tables that start with the letter B or views or anything like that. So this is coming from the dictionary. This is coming from the snippets. So I kind of get the best of both here. But I could also get code assistance from what's already in my editor, which is kind of nice. So VS Code has really good type ahead completers. You know, so if I have something up here like, which is not valid SQL, you know, it's saying, oh, that word's already in the editor, offers him to that as an autocomplete. So I think you're really going to like that as well. If I say select star from activities, and then I can say fetch first 10 rows. You know, so it's got that kind of completer syntax too. I think I showed the, oh, I didn't do the peak. Let's see if we can get that to work. So you're going to be writing PL SQL blocks of code in here too, right? So we have our lovely REST API tech, which is ORDS, and it has a public synonym called ORDS, which calls a package out of ORDS metadata. So if I wanted to go define, for example, a new REST API using our PL SQL API, you can say begin ORDS define service. See, it's automatically completing there for me. I can do open. and it's saying, hey, give me that full thing. That's really hard to read, so I can right click and say format. So there's everything I need there to run that bit of code. Now, if I still need to know more about what this thing is, cross your fingers that this works, I can right click, and instead of doing the open or go to declaration, I can do P. Come on, baby. Yeah. So here is the package spec out of the dictionary for the defined service procedure in this package. So our developers, who I would say by name, but they would be embarrassed, so I won't do that to Colin and Dermot and Peter. They're really, really good about having super awesome comments. So I can see exactly what these things mean by reading the public spec package. So I can see, oh, what's P status? That's publication status. I can do published or not published, but the default's published. So okay, I'm cool with the default. I can take that out. So that's really, really super nice. That's the same editing experience like Python developers have when they're using Python API calls. So since we're following the rules of the road for VS Code and this language server protocol, you're getting that same experience for SQL and PL SQL call lookups. I'm going to stop doing demo for a second, and I'm going to cover what we're working on next. And then hopefully we'll have plenty of time to finish off at least some of the additional Q&As.
Well, then let me take one more question that came up a number of times. So
Yeah,
one
please.
of the questions was modeler. A lot of
Oh,
people
yes.
model, not enough people model. And I think it's probably on the next slide Jeff's going to talk about, but the plan is fully to bring the modeler over into this world as well. And it's actively being worked on. Can't really commit to dates and stuff, but the intent is absolutely to bring the modeler over here so you can do classic logical relational modeling just like you do in Modeler today, and bring that world over into the VS Code world.
So we're still doing quarterly updates. That means every calendar 3-month period, a major update. We're trying to do minor updates every month, but you're going to get frequent updates. It says 2026. I don't know what it is. We're going to spend the time it takes to get the old stuff ready in the new world. But at some point, there will be a cutover. Right now, under active development reports, huge feature used by us internally for making features in the product work, but also used by tons of our users writing their own custom user-defined reports. So you're going to get that sooner than later. The visual execution plans, I wanted to live demo that today, but just missed the cutoff. A real-time SQL monitoring feature, you're going to get that. Our CI/CD support, so we're not just giving you the ability to run and write raw PL SQL and SQL. We want you to have like the full developer workflow experience. So checking files in and out of Git, seeing your diffs, seeing your deltas, generating packaged change logs with our liquid-based technology. So it makes it really easy to feed into pipelines. If you've seen us talk about this new JSON relational duality view, which kind of gives you the best of the NoSQL and the SQL world, we're going to have a visual drag and drop JSON relational duality view builder, support for the exciting new vector stuff you've heard us talk about in 23C. You saw me demo the funnels, the filtering of the connections, the file-based PL SQL is coming. Everyone's always asking, hey, when do the DBA features coming? Are we going to get the DBA features? And yes, absolutely, you're going to get the DBA features. And of course, the REST API support and support for, whatever your favorite feature is, there's a good chance the plan is for us to bring it over. And it's all just being prioritized based on demand and, what developers we have available to work on this stuff.
Well, and also important on what Jeff showed, and this slide kind of goes into it. Can you go back one?
Yes, I can.
In that first column down there, it says Dockers. So this is a great example of why we are coming to VS Code, because, for example, their Docker integration works great. You can literally install their Docker extension, right-click on a Docker, and say launch SQL Dev inside the Docker. And what happens is VS Code actually pushes inside the Docker a VS Code server where the Chrome that's outside, which is the Chrome on your desktop, talks to the VS Code inside the Docker. So everything from our stance of SQL Dev, everything's localhost. We had to do exactly zero work for that. So the other way that exact same pattern helps is if you work in OCI or if you're working with SSH and port forwarding and port tunneling and things like that, you can actually, again, register an SSH connection directly with VS Code and say, you know what, go launch me a SQL Dev on that remote machine. No more SSH port forwarding stuff to deal with for the connectivity. You can actually, from your desktop, running VS Code, effectively remote control the one server side that's running right next to that database. It makes life super easy. I've been using that a lot with the work we do in OCI.
Tyler asks, does dbms output go to the output panel after you set server output on? Yes. And in the next update, we will have server output on by default. Christian, hey, Christian. Christian, you can just ping me on Slack if you have these questions. Christian's asked, hey, can we configure the formatter to our own preferences? Not yet. Later this year, we'll have the full formatter preferences up and running. I'm going to try to answer all of the questions probably on that Slack or in an upcoming blog post. I can't get to all of them today, sorry. One of the other cool things we want to do is take real full advantage of like the entire development universe out there. So if I'm I don't know, a Graal VM engineer or a Java developer, hey, I'm dealing with Oracle databases. How can I get like the best of both worlds? So can I not generate Java code based on like the database project that I'm working on, So drag and drop in between environments, can I drop a table and get the Python call to go represent that object, for example. So yes, we're going to be doing that kind of stuff too, which we had kind of in the old SQL Dev, but this is going to be much more native and I think much more rich and much more extensible. So the questions, if you want your question on record, one of these two places. So our old school forums, which have been around forever, there is a new forum called SQL Developer for VS Code. But we also have a place for our extension in the marketplace, and the marketplace has its own Q&A. If it's a quick question, the Q&A is fine, but if we're going to go back and forth 20 times debugging an issue, please either open a service request. By the way, we have a dedicated support team at My Oracle Support to support SQL Developer, including the VS Code extension. So you can open service requests if you have a valid database support contract with My Oracle Support on our extension. And then, of course, like the public spaces, Chris and I are both active on Twitter and LinkedIn, although I'm probably more active than he is because I don't have a real job and he's too busy coding and stuff.
Not sure that's how it works. But we're everywhere, right? The forums, the Twitter, on the dev Slack that they introduced, on the Apex World Slack. If you get a question, you can't reach us, you're not trying hard to reach us, basically.
You're not looking hard.
Emails are not hard to guess. Mine's easy to guess. Jeff's is a little bit harder.
Jeff.d.smith@oracle.com. And Chris is Larry.ellison@oracle.com.
Exactly.
Chris with the K. Chris.Riss. So again, I think we've kept about 200 people for an hour. I know you have other plans like eating or hanging out with your kids or walking your dog. Thanks for giving us this time and letting us share what we're working on. Feedback's important. So specific feedback to this event, when you say goodbye, you're probably going to get an automated survey thing there. We read those actually. I toss all the negative ones, but I keep the fun ones and I share that with people. We're going to have other events. And by us, I mean Oracle and the development team and the database team. So you can track those on one of these two bit.ly things. So thanks everyone for your time. Thanks, Chris, for hanging out with me for this hour and helping out with the questions. And we look forward to seeing you at an upcoming event